This brings us to Convergence, which we could either do with a crystal meth addict or the guy on the left. What do you choose? Left, right jokes are the best. Stacy from Microsoft's like, Jeremy, quit it. Don't say that about our founder. Okay, so should we learn from a criminal or Bill Gates? Criminal. This is Dave Dell. He lived the good life. Fast cars, exotic dancers, police chases, crystal meth. And sooner or later, that adds up. And so he's in jail, and when he's there, he thinks about how different his life would be if he simply joined the family bake shop with his two brothers and his dad. And there, it was just a tiny little bake shop. He needed to make a difference when he got out of jail, but he didn't really know how, because he never paid attention to the family business growing up. So he looked at all the little things he could do. He made them organic, which gets people that like organic food. He made them local sourced with local delivery on bicycles, which gets the restaurants, now a new set of customers. He put solar panels on the roof, which gets the eco crowd, which is awesome because they don't care what the food tastes like. You all know it. Fair wages, which were popular in the Pacific Northwest, and he added an extra component of a social good aspect, which was that they would rehabilitate ex-cons, hire them, and pay them a fair wage, which is not something that happens. All of this drew a little more attention to them, so he made one loaf of bread with a shock brand. Shock brands were pretty hot at the time, and he called it, even though it never killed a man, Dave's Killer Bread. It's killer good. Say no to bread on drugs. Now, none of these individual ideas were the reason for success, but they add up and propel Dave's Bread, and pretty soon it becomes a $50 million empire. You increase your odds of winning by aligning to all of the little trends. And people often think innovation is about a huge eureka moment. It's usually something small and simple. A twist on the past, combining, adding value, bringing something digital to a physical world, aligning forces, or co-branding. I want to show you a different style of convergence, which is more about mixing. This is the tale of my sister, Kyla. So Kyla was an art history superstar. Oxford scholarships, became an Oxford professor. She'd get standing ovations, just incredible. But then at age 25, she got diagnosed with ovarian cancer and a 50-50 chance to live. She made a choice, and she decided she was going to be a burning light and go all out. And she would be the best professor no matter what, and she would do all-nighters, and she'd keep on getting her standing ovations. 5 years through the chemo, things start getting even more complicated, which is she says that losing your hair is not a problem. You can get a cool wig, and the only problem is when you lose your eyebrows. That's when you feel weird because you stare back in the mirror and you don't see your own reflection. You see a sick person looking back, and that's the thing that's tough. So she gets her eyebrows tattooed in, but the tattoo has a metallic pigment, and every time that she goes to get her routine MRIs, it rips the pigment out, and she needs 17 procedures in order to fix them. So then, 5 years in, she's cancer-free, which means you're generally in the clear. We have a big, huge party. We invite a couple hundred people. It's everyone she ever knew. It's a celebration of her life, and we're so excited. And then, like, horrible story, a week later, she's re-diagnosed with the cancer again. This time her doctor says, you're going to make a choice now. You're not a professor. You're going to choose if you want to live. And if that's what you choose, then I want you to do something completely different, something simple, something meaningful, but just like a hobby. So she thinks about what she could make the biggest difference with, and she thinks back to her eyebrows, and so she does the quest to see if she can make more realistic eyebrows. But they would have to be gentle, safe, and realistic, and those are actually all things that don't exist with current tattoos. So for the first challenge, for making something that was safe, she actually connected through different professors and ended up finding something plastic surgeons use that's like a pigment that she could turn into a safe pigment. But then to make something you could operate on a cancer patient with is very difficult because their skin is much more irritated, I guess. And so she goes to prison. I like the joke of saying my sister went to prison, where a teardrop says you killed a man, dots on the hand mean a year spent in jail, a clock with no hands means you're in for life, and if it's Russia and you have stars on your knees, it means you will kneel for nobody. So she goes and she meets the Yakuza mafia graffiti artist. They bond over a love of art and her story. And so they tell her how they make tattoos in a prison that don't show up to the guards, that don't have any redness. Using that in her world means she could operate on a cancer patient. But then she needs to find something realistic, and it doesn't exist. So she thinks back to art history. Raphael, Da Vinci, Michelangelo. By the way, this is how you know it's the brother telling the story, because those are all Ninja Turtles. In their day, though, what's interesting is they weren't the famous and most commissioned artist. It was actually Titian at the time. You'd be the most commissioned one if you knew how to draw dirty photos. And that's not necessarily what stands over time, but realistic skin pigment was the most important thing. And Titian developed a technique that actually made Da Vinci hire spies to try and figure out what Titian was doing. He would take ink, put in egg whites, dilute them, and then instead of painting a figure once, he'd paint it 20 times. Each layer being a thin, semi-translucent, sort of like a stained glass that almost adds up to be imperfect and illuminescent in the end. Using the same techniques, my sister was able to combine everything together to be able to make something that allows cancer patients to restore their eyebrows, cover tattoos, or in the case of this woman, she was attacked by a dog when she was 7 years old and lived with the scars for her whole life until she meets Kyla. And the really intense examples, if you were to go to cosmetictransformations.com, are what she can do with areola for breast cancer survivors. The story part I often forget to tell is that she's not only changed the world in an interesting way, she's won all sorts of innovation awards, she has Hollywood Elite, she helps wounded soldiers, thousands of people now, but the coolest part is 2 kids and cancer-free. So that's the story of my sister. Thank you. She teaches us another example of convergence, that your breakthrough exists in some combination that you have not yet seen. You'd ask yourself what services could be combined with your offering, or what companies could you collaborate with? Do that as a workshop. Push yourself. How far could you go?